Hi, my name is Duke Engel. I first came to the Independence Center in 1972, which is part of Bryan. I'm a licensed mental health counselor and also a licensed alcohol and drug abuse counselor. I'm going to share some thoughts and ideas with you about creating an intervention plan. About 20 years ago, several of us at the Independence Center decided that we were no longer going to do traditional interventions. We decided at that time that we wanted to develop interventions that matched up more closely with our own personal values and our beliefs as addiction counselors. We wanted our interventions to be open and honest rather than secretly meeting with families and friends of a loved one. We wanted our interventions to be respectful rather than looking for ways to coerce someone into the treatment process. We wanted to look for ways that we could be invitational in offering people the treatment process rather than surprising them with an intervention meeting. My friend and colleague, Otto Schultz, developed an analogy called flashing the brights, which helped describe the techniques that we were going to use in the interventions that we were putting forward. We knew that a good intervention is an intervention where you say the right thing at the right time, at the right place. Our problem was none of us knew exactly what that was. When we were doing a good intervention, this is as close as we came to whatever we thought maybe a perfect intervention would be, although we never got to use it. We thought maybe the perfect intervention would be a husband and wife driving down the highway. They noticed a state trooper behind them with their lights going on, so they pull off the road, and as they're sitting along the road and the trooper's approaching the car, the man rolls down his window, looks out the window and goes, "Hey, what are you stopping me for?" And the trooper goes, "Well, you were speeding." And the guy goes, "No, I wasn't. As soon as I saw your lights, I looked down at my speedometer. I'm going 65 miles an hour. And the trooper goes, "I have radar. I clocked you at 73. Guy says, "I don't care about your radar. You're wrong. I was not speeding." Now, about this time, his wife, who'd been very quiet, she leans across towards the driver's window and she goes, "Officer, I've been going to these meetings where we work on family issues, and one of the things I've learned is you shouldn't argue with my husband when he's drunk." Now we decided that was the perfect intervention, although we'll probably never ever get to use it. We did decide that we had to have certain rules that encapsulated our values. These are the rules and the principles that we want all of our interventions to be measured up against. And then once we had our principles down, then we put these against our techniques, our intervention techniques. So whatever plan that we came up with, did it match up with our values? The first value that we looked at is we wanted our interventions to be open and honest. You see, in alcoholism, many times they talk about the alcoholic family as being a dysfunctional family. Now, what dysfunction means is that in my pocket here, I have this pen. And when it goes back in my pocket, it's hidden from view. You don't see it. You don't know it's there. And maybe no one says anything about it. That's exactly what happens in an alcoholic family with the addiction. Everyone may know it's there, and people may even have very strong feelings about it, but no one ever says anything about it or does anything about it, unless they're, a very dramatic moment where people are arguing and fighting, but otherwise it's something that's hidden. And so we realized that if we could make our interventions open and honest, we could take this dysfunction and we could put it right out in front of people, and now it was no longer a dysfunction, it was a family problem. And this was dramatically different because a family problem is something that people talk about, that family members can talk about. And so our thought was that our goal was to have the family be able to talk about this around the kitchen table. Now, many family members would say to us, "You have got to be kidding. There is no way that we are ever going to be able to calmly and logically sit and talk about alcoholism or drug addiction of a family member at our kitchen table. And yet many of the family members that we worked with and were involved with had that very experience. So think about this. Hi, honey. How was your day? Pretty good day. Pretty good. In fact, I called an addiction counselor today and talked to him about your use of drugs. Very helpful. Are you kidding? You what? So what did he say to you? He said, well, I have his name and phone number up on the refrigerator. And he said, if you had any questions, you wanted to know what we talked about, just feel free to give him a call. Now, I know that sounds a bit over the top, and yet we've had families who have done very similar things. Our interventions were going to be open, and they were going to be honest. The next thing we wanted in our interventions is we wanted them to be caring. There's a lot of feelings in the alcoholic family or in the addicted family. I mean, there's anger there. There's a lot of hurt feelings. There's a lot of fear. People are really scared at times. But the feeling that we wanted to emphasize in our interventions was that concern. That needed to be the primary feeling. Let's deal with these other feelings because they're important, but let's deal with them over here. But when it comes to approaching the alcoholic or addict, let's put our caring and our concern at the forefront of what we're trying to do. Ron was our first intervention counselor, and he tells the story about the spouse that came to him, and he asked the question, do you ever let your husband know that you're really concerned about his drinking? And she said, you'd better believe it. I tell that man every morning how I feel about his drinking the night before, and I tell him exactly what he did. And Ron was kind of, well, he said, I know you're concerned, but I got to give you this feedback. I mean, you sound pretty angry. And she said, I am angry. This has been going on for years. And Ron had to work with her and ask her to approach him with your concern. Put that feeling at the front of your intervention. Now, he actually came in and spoke with Ron a number of weeks later. And what he had to say was, so my wife, she's been nagging about my drinking for years. That's no big deal. But he said the other morning, she came to the table, in a very quiet voice. She told me how concerned she was about my drinking. And then she started to cry and tell me that she was concerned that my health was declining. Now, frankly, between you and I don't think I had a problem. But I told her if she's that concerned about it, I would come and talk to you. He had started the treatment process simply because he had heard that love from her and that concern. The third value, the third principle that we measure our interventions against is this intervention respectful? I had a man many years ago talk to me about his daughter and how he could help his daughter. And finally he said, let me just cut through this. He said, you give me an admission date. You tell me what time you want her here. I've got a couple big friends. We will just make this happen. She will be here and we will admit her. And I was like, well, and we talked a long, long time about being as respectful as possible. Now, there are times when we do need to force someone into treatment, possibly through the mental health commitment process. If the situation has become dangerous and is very desperate and something needs to be done immediately and this person is resistant, it does happen. There are times when we have to do that and need to do that. But as much as possible, we want to be respectful in the way that we approach people. And we only want coercive things done if there's no other alternative. There's no other way to reach out to them. The fourth rule, the fourth principle that we want our interventions to be measured against is this intervention healthy? Is it healthy for the person that we're intervening on? Is it good for them? And not only that, though, is it healthy for the people that are doing the intervention? Is it a good thing for them? I had a brother and sister come in one time, and they were very concerned about their dad's drinking. But he had been alcoholic since they were very little. And not only was he alcoholic, but he was also had mental illness. His behavior was very bizarre, very weird, and frankly, at times it was ugly. As they told me about his alcoholism, they alternated between crying and laughing about his behavior. At times his behavior was just tragic, and at other times it was so weird that it was funny. The son finally said to me, he said, I am in recovery myself. I got into the program a number of years ago. And yeah, I know we're trying to create a plan here. I put together the best plan I could years ago. He said, I decided that I was going to go to lunch with my dad once a week. So we go to lunch. We do not talk about anything serious. And that is the best relationship I've ever had with my dad. So I am quite certain if I say one word to him about his drinking, that's done. It will not happen anymore. He is that way. The daughter, she said, the last time I went to my father's house, where I won't go anymore, but the last time I went to his house, his behavior was so disgusting and so personally threatening to me, that when I left that house, I was devastated. I was just wiped out for days afterwards. She said, I cannot imagine going into that house and saying something to him about his drinking. I'm scared. When I listened to that, and I tried to measure it against our values, I decided it was not healthy. It was not going to be healthy for them to talk to their dad. We did have a backup plan. The son, for example, he was in a good recovery plan. We wanted that to continue. The daughter, she needed some information about adult children of alcoholics and some support groups that would help her out. But the only other plan we could come up with was they were both convinced that sooner or later he was going to end up hospitalized because his drinking was now doing serious physical damage. We got lucky. We got very lucky. 2 days later, he was hospitalized, and so we could put our plan into action. They called the doctor, expressed their concern to the physician. They also called the hospital personnel, expressed their concern about his drinking, and gave them details about his alcoholism. As a result, the doctor wrote the doctor's order. The intervention nurse came, saw him in his bed, and surprised all of us, he agreed to come to treatment and did surprisingly well in treatment. We got lucky. We accidentally said the right thing at the right time. He had become convinced that he might die from his drinking because of what had happened. And we were there, and it worked out. So those are the values, and we always review that with families first. So let's look at these values, let's look at whatever plan we're putting together. Can we say that it meets all of these criteria? You know, can we say that it's open and honest, that it's caring, that it's respectful, that it's healthy? And then here's the techniques. Here are the techniques that we can take a look at to try to reach out to the person that you're concerned about. We like to start, and normally always do start, with an invitation. Now, an invitation is simply asking that person if they would be willing to seek these services for their alcohol or drug use. We believe that the invitation should be very brief. We think that the invitation should be very low-key. We don't like to have the family or friends argue with the alcoholic or addict. Don't try and talk them into it. Don't try and convince them. Don't try and prove anything to them. Just simply ask the question. And so we help them create the question. And the question is usually a version of this sentence. It's usually a version of, I am concerned about your drug use. Would you be willing to go with me to talk to an alcohol and drug counselor? That's usually the whole invitation right there. families listen to this and they go, they're not going to go. You realize this. They're not going to go. So, well, I think it's respectful to at least ask them first, don't you? Wouldn't it be, if somebody was really concerned about you and they were talking about your problems and what they thought ought to be done, wouldn't you think that they should come and at least ask you first before they do anything else? All right. Now, surprisingly enough, there is a solid percentage of those people that come in simply because we've asked them. Family members will tell us sometimes, well, I've told them they have a problem, I've told them they need help, but you're right, I probably never specifically asked them if they would go now, and we don't always know why they came in. Maybe it's because they don't want somebody talking behind their back, maybe they want to find out what's going on here, and sometimes that person does know inside that they have a problem and they've been really just waiting for somebody to approach them. But for whatever reason, there are people that come in simply because we invited them in. Now, an invitation does something very powerful for us. Do you remember the dysfunction? When you invite somebody to get help for their alcohol or drugs, you brought it out on the table. We are now free to talk about it. Now the family says, well, yeah, but what about all the people that are going to turn us down? There's going to be lots of those. That's true. So we have a backup statement. If they say anything except yes, and that means if they say maybe, I'll think about it, this is a bad time for me, no way. If they say anything but yes, the backup statement is this. Well, I am so concerned about your addiction and so stressed out about it that I'm going to go see a counselor and get some help for myself. The dysfunction's gone. This is a problem. This is on the table. You can post this on the refrigerator now. You can let them know, I'm going to be late for supper tonight because tonight's the night I'm going to see the addictions counselor. It has now become something open for conversation in that family because this person now doesn't have any secrets about the fact that they're concerned about this problem and they're seeking some help. We've had quite a few families where the invitation becomes the whole intervention. The entire intervention is going to be centered on just making invitations. About 2 months ago, I had a family member contact me by phone from out of town, and she said, a number of us are coming to town in 2 weeks, and we would like for you to help us plan an intervention on a family member. And I'm going, 2 weeks. Why don't we do the intervention right now? Why don't we do a whole bunch of them before you even get to town? And that kind of threw her. She's going, I don't understand what you're saying to me. So I talked to her about the principles, and I talked to her about an invitation, and we found out that the family member they were concerned about was actually talking to 2 family members about his drinking. But he was telling them, I know this is something I can handle myself. I know that I need to quit, but I'm sure that I can do this on my own. So I got into contact with those 2 family members. We put our little invitation together. So when they talked to him on the phone, they could say to him, would you be willing to go in and get an alcohol and drug evaluation and get some recommendations, see what a professional has to say? You know, it doesn't commit you to anything. You don't have to do what they say, but why don't you at least go get a professional opinion? He agreed to do that. He got some recommendations for residential treatment, refused to do that, but he said, I will come to some outpatient. And so by the time the family actually arrived in town, they had not only done a number of interventions, but they already had him started in the treatment process. Maybe he'll make it at that level, maybe not, but he was now at least in the system and getting some kind of help. Their intervention became, wow, thank you for doing this. I'm so grateful. I feel so good about you. I want to encourage you any way I can. They became supportive of him, and that was the intervention, not what they were picturing when they first came. Another time I had a father, mother, sister of a young man. They were all very concerned, and so we worked on the invitation, and frankly, it took us about an hour to come up with the statement that they wanted to use. And the statement was, "We can tell you are depressed by the way that you've been drinking lately. Would you be willing to go with us to see an alcohol and drug counselor?" But here was the key word. Are you ready for help yet? They had to find an intervention statement that they could use over time. And that word "yet" was the word that took us so long to figure out. And so over the course of the next few months, they were able to say that to him at the appropriate times until the day came where he said yes. And that was the day we were waiting for, the right time. And when it happened, he agreed to go to treatment, went to a halfway house, and we were very fortunate. He did very well afterwards. I was contacted once by a social worker, and she took me to a large residential building that housed many disabled people in their own apartments. Well, the reason she brought me there was because some of the residents were very concerned about their alcoholic friend that was in the residential hall, and they wanted to reach out to him in some way. But when I began talking about intervention plans, they were going, "Oh, no, we are not going to talk to him. You don't understand. This guy's got a gun. When he gets drunk, he loves to pull that gun out, and if he gets angry, the last thing I need is bullet holes coming up, through my floor. I don't think it's a good idea to go talk to him about it." So we looked at other options, other ways to invite him, and there was a pattern here that I had been unaware of. They said, well, when he gets drunk, yeah, then he calls us and talks about his problems. Once in a while, he even tells us about his alcohol problem. So I said, well, how about if I give everybody my card, which I did. It's got my name, my phone number on it. When he calls you up drunk, starts to talk to him about a problem, just say, I think you ought to call this Duke Engel. Here's his phone number. Give him a call and see if he can help you with your drinking. A couple weeks later, I'm sitting at my desk. The phone rings. I pick it up. There's this guy on the other end. He goes, "I don't know who you are, but I'm telling you, for some reason, all of my friends think I need to come and talk to you about my drinking." And he cooperated with me. Because of his disability, he wasn't really able to come in and see me, but he was willing to go to an agency he was comfortable with where we could set up that alcohol and drug evaluation. His residential friends had done their job. They had found their way to reach out to him. You can see that what we're doing here is we are creating a network of people, all reaching out to the same individual, all inviting them into the treatment process. One of the most important things that we learned is that it takes lots of interventions to reach out to this person before they become willing to get help. One of the analogies we like to use is someone that looks at you and goes, "Whoa, you're the first person I ever met that had a tail. Have you always had a tail, or is this something you grew recently?" And you're looking at them and you're going, "You're crazy." And then the person next to him goes, "Yeah, I've noticed your tail too. It's really interesting." And now you're sitting there going, "There's two crazy people in a room." Well, what happens if 3 people and 5 people and 7 people start to talk to you about your tail? Sooner or later, you're going to turn around and look. What are they talking about? And that's what we're after many times in the intervention, where enough people have expressed their concern and reached out to this person that they begin to take a look for the first time at themselves and begin to think, maybe I should accept one of these invitations and get this checked out. A second technique that we use is the technique of presenting facts. You remember from flashing your brights, you can say what you see, and that is the facts. So how do you present facts to someone? You stop with all the secrets. You stop covering up things, and you begin presenting to the person what's in front of them. I've had people come in and they've said, you know, this person doesn't think they have a problem with drugs. I do. I've watched them over and over. And yet they're telling me, no, I've got it under control. So are they right or am I right? And I've said, just start to write things down. Just start putting it down on paper. Take a look at all of the facts. Had a woman come to us one time and we said, get the facts down on paper. And she had an intervention plan which you've never used since, probably will never use again. But her idea was she bought herself a big desk calendar. She put it on the kitchen table. And then as she was sitting there, every night she would write down how much her husband had to drink, what he did, what he said, and how she felt about it. So every morning when he got up, ate his Cheerios, he could read exactly what he had drank the night before and exactly read about what he had done. And it was going to get very difficult for him to say to her repeatedly, I don't drink that much, that often, when he was looking at the amounts every day. Audio tapes seemed to show up every now and then. The one I remember best was of a gentleman we called Scotty. Scotty's wife cut an audio tape of him and let him listen to it. And when he heard what he had said, he was devastated. He told me later, he said, I knew that I was angry at my kids. I knew that I was correcting them. But I was so drunk, I did not realize how vicious my voice sounded. I didn't realize the language that I used with them. And that was the catalyst to get Scotty started in treatment. And went on then to actually be a colleague in the field. And of course the joke in his family was always this. His wife always told him, Scotty, you ever drink again? I'm pulling that tape out, I'm playing it for everybody. But that was the joke. But it was the tape, the facts that were presented back to him so vividly by having to listen to himself. Another time a woman told me, my husband's drug problem is just out of control, and I just found out he hasn't been doing the income taxes on our business. What am I going to do about this? Again, let's go get the facts. Is your name on this company? Yes. That's why I'm concerned. Let's go talk to your accountant. Let's find out how long he's not been filing income taxes. Let's find out how bad the situation is. And let's make it open knowledge to everybody concerned that's involved in the business process. Let's get the facts out there. There was a prominent attorney in town whose wife came to see me many years ago, and she was really concerned about her husband's drinking. She told him that she was coming to see me. He didn't care. Do whatever you want to. And she didn't know what to do. She had invited him in. She was a very soft-hearted person. She didn't know what she could possibly do. And then one day she told me, you know, I'm an honest person, very honest. But when it comes to his drinking, I lie for him. That's something I want to change. I don't want to do that anymore. So she went and told him, you know, remember, open and honest, respectful. She told him, I'm not going to lie to anyone about your drinking anymore. And he was like, whatever. So he was very prominent. He didn't even have an office downtown. He had just a very few, very wealthy clients that came to his home. And now his wife, for years, if he was drunk, she would say to these clients, she'd say, I'm sorry, he can't see you today. He's sick. I'm sorry, he can't see you. He's out of town. And she just changed one little thing. She said, I'm sorry, he can't see you today. He's drunk. He was in my office, pounding on my desk, wanting to know what I had told his wife. But the key was, he was in my office talking about his drinking. And that was the beginning of the treatment process that resulted in his actually going to residential treatment and sobering up. Hiding bottles. One of my favorites, very common story. So when somebody's hiding bottles or they're hiding their drugs around the house, spouses and family members many times like to throw things down the drain, throw it in the fire, all kinds of things, flush it down the toilet, all of these kinds of things that they'll do with alcohol or drugs when they find them. But we've changed our process, especially with alcohol. We did an intervention one time where we had a mother and her 12-year-old daughter concerned about the man in the house. And this 12-year-old was terrific. She was a crackerjack, and she considered her dad hiding beer. That was like an Easter egg hunt to her. She knew all of his hiding places, where he kept it, how much he had. And so we built an intervention around her Easter egg hunting. So when he would come home from work, she would say, "Dad, here's all the beer that I found hidden in the closet, and so it's in the refrigerator so it can be cold for you now. And Dad, look at this huge can of empty cans, or a huge box of empty cans I found. I'm going to go recycle these. All of these are yours, and I found them hidden down in the basement." And she put it out on the table for him to look at what he was doing. We did an intervention one time where it was a farm intervention, farm family, and these were grown sons and daughters that came back to talk to Dad. And so they sat around on a Sunday afternoon and said, "Dad, we're concerned about your drinking." He was very quiet, and he listened to them very attentively. And then when they said, "And Dad, we're concerned about you hiding bottles around the farm," he actually stood up and he said, "I have been very patient with you kids. I've tried to listen to everything you said, but when you start to say things that are simply not true, I'm not gonna sit around for this." Then each one of them reached behind, under the cushion, behind the pillow, and they said, "Well, Dad, this is the bottle I found in the corn crib. And Dad, this is the bottle I found in the garage. And Dad, this is the one I found in the farm, or out in the barn." And he had to look at what he had just lied to them about. And again, that kind of impact of coming face to face with the facts, but in a respectful way, that's a very powerful intervention technique. The third technique that we work on is what we call healthy choices. Families will come to us and they want to tell us how bad the drinking is, how bad the drug use is, and our response is oftentimes, "So why do you care?" Why do I care? And so they begin to tell us how it's affected them personally. And that's the question. What's it doing to you? And as they begin to tell us what the alcoholism and drug addiction is doing to them personally, then we can help them develop healthier choices to deal with their own problem. Some examples of that. A woman who says to her brother, "You are a good uncle to my children. They love you. I know you love being with them. But I've told you many times, do not drink and drive when you've got my kids in the car. And you keep doing it. And lately you've been telling the kids, now don't tell your mom, she'll just get upset. But you know the kids, they're honest. They tell me that. So I know in my heart that if something happened to those kids because you were drinking and driving, I would feel awful. And besides that, you would feel awful. I know you would, because I know how much you care about those kids. So I've made a decision. Until you get some help for your drinking, I will not allow the children to go anywhere with you in the car. Once you get some help, then we can talk about it, but not till then. Another intervention that was very similar to that were 3 adult daughters who went to their father and said to him, "Dad, we're concerned about your drinking, but the thing we're most concerned about is the grandkids. They see you intoxicated all the time when they come over here to visit you. We don't want them growing up seeing their grandpa as a drunk and talking about their grandpa as a drunk. That's not healthy for children to be seeing that intoxication. So Dad, until you get some help for your drinking, we're not going to bring your grandkids over to see you. And when you come to visit us, you can see the grandkids if you haven't been drinking, if you are sober." Now those folks are not trying to punish anyone. They're not trying to hurt that alcoholic or hurt that addict. All they're trying to do is make choices that take care of some of the things that are most important to them and to take care of themselves. There was a woman one time who talked to her about her husband, who was a really big guy, and she said, oh, he'll get drunk and he will pass out almost every night in the living room. He'll pass out on the sofa, he'll pass out on a chair. Sometimes he passes out on the floor. And I go out there sometimes in the middle of the night. He's too big to drag to the room. And I'm saying, well, just let him there. And she said, well, I have to let him there. But sometimes when he's out there, I check his breath. I cannot even tell if he's breathing or not. I can't find respirations. So I go to bed, like you said, but then I'm up all night thinking that maybe in the morning I'm going to go out there and he's going to be stone cold. So I asked her, if tonight you went home and you saw someone passed out drunk in your front yard, what would you do? You went over, you checked to see if they're breathing, you can't tell whether or not they're breathing, what then? She thought about it. She said, well, I'd call 911. So I said, so you treat a stranger better than you treat your husband? And she's going, oh, if I called 911 on him, oh, he would be furious. I said, well, at least you know he'd be okay. So again, respectful, open and honest. She went to him, she said, the next time I can't tell that you're breathing and you're passed out, I'm going to call the ambulance. The next time he passed out like that, he woke up in a hospital room. They had trouble finding respirations also. And he was furious. But he did agree to go to treatment at that point. And I thought it was interesting what his wife had to say. She said, as mad as I knew he was going to be, I slept good that night. I knew that he was going to be okay in the morning. Driving drunk is another very common experience. Or finding drugs in the house is another common experience. And so some families develop strategies where they say, if we find drugs in the house, we're going to call the police. We're telling you this, we're trying to be respectful, trying to be open, but you need to know that's the decision we've made. And so this person knows ahead of time that when they get into their addiction, if they get into that car, here's a family that may be calling, and maybe calling to get help so that they don't hurt themselves or they don't hurt someone else. The fourth technique that we look at is support groups. It's very, very difficult to intervene. It's very stressful. Sometimes it's difficult to stick with it. And so families need help. They need support to do that. And so the support for them oftentimes is the family itself. So families may begin to talk to each other. They may have a network where they call each other. They talk about what's happened. They talk about what they've said to this person recently. They share the facts about their drinking. And in that way, they support each other. They keep each other going. Another support system that may be very helpful to them is Al-Anon. And Al-Anon is a place where they can go and meet other family members that are struggling with addiction in their family. And these are families that can maybe help teach them healthy ways to be able to survive and thrive in that addicted home. Another support group may be the counseling staff, the counselor that hangs in there with this family as they go through this ongoing intervention. Sometimes the worst thing I see happen in families that are beginning to intervene is that they don't feel that support to continue. They hope that somehow this one intervention they did was successful in getting this person to treatment, and it wasn't. And so then they give up. And that's why that support system is so helpful, where they get not only hope from these people, but they also get new ideas and the courage maybe to go on and continue to intervene on the person that they're concerned about and the person that they love. What if it doesn't work? What if I do all these things and it doesn't work? What if they keep drinking and they keep drugging? I sometimes ask people, what's your goal here? They say, well, my goal is to get them sober. My goal is to get them off drugs. And I say, well, making somebody else do what you want them to do, that sounds pretty controlling. Frankly, that's pretty manipulative. So maybe you need to look at intervention in a different way. What should your goal be? I think that that person's goal is to reach out and turn it on that person and look at the other side of it. If the alcoholic and the addict does get sober and they do get clean, who deserves the credit for that? Most any family member is going to tell you the alcoholic does, the addict does. They deserve the credit. You throw them the life preserver, but it's up to them to grab a hold of it and take advantage of the help that you're offering. And if they do that, they deserve a pat on the back. What's the family deserve the pat on the back for? Because they've done the right thing. If you have reached out to this person in a caring, respectful way, and you've tried to help, and you've offered them help, and you've done the best you could to do that, then you deserve a pat on the back. You done good. And that was your goal, simply to do the right thing. I want to tell you two final stories about doing the right thing. You continue to intervene because you never know when is going to be the right time, the right place, the right words. There was a gentleman in this community, a friend of mine, named Joe. Joe was in the human services field. He was very knowledgeable about alcoholism, very knowledgeable about intervention, and very alcoholic. And many of us had reached out to Joe many, many times trying to help him. And he was slick. You know, he'd listen to you, but he would blow you off and just continue to do what he wanted to do, which was drink. So one day, his best friend came to me, and she said, Duke, we need to intervene on Joe again because he's really getting bad. I feel like I have to do something. So I said, okay. So she went to Joe, and she said, Joe, Duke and I are planning your intervention. What's a good time for you? When could you get together with us? And he was like, you want me to give you a time? She said, yeah. So he did. He said, you gave her a time. And then she said to him, well, so far, Duke and I are the only two people in your intervention. Who else should we invite? She told me that he started to cry. And he said to her, you're the only two left. He had blown off so many people. So many people have had to withdraw from him just to take care of themselves. I mean, his addiction was destructive. And for them not to see this destructive process, they'd remove themselves, probably in a very healthy way. And now we were it. And it was one of the most bizarre intervention conversations I've ever had, where I was saying to Joe, okay, Joe, you know the drill. You know we're concerned. You know why. Are you ready for help? Yet. And that day, Joe said, yes. And for the first time, went to residential treatment and got sober. The second time is much more embarrassing for me, my second story. There was a man who came to the Independence Center about once a year to see me because his drinking was getting bad. He would get so bad he couldn't work anymore. He would end up on the streets. He would come to see me. I'd get him into a state-supported treatment center, sober up for a little while, get healthy, go back to work, but eventually back on the streets. It was a cycle that had gone over and over. So I'm really busy one day, really busy. And I get a call from the front desk. And they go, old so-and-so's here to see you. I'm going, not today, not today. So I said, wait a minute or two and then tell him to come up. And I got on the phone immediately to the treatment center. I said, can you take this guy? If I send you the eval, will you take him? What's the date? What's the time? They give me a date. They give me a time. So he walks in my office and he said, Duke, I've been drinking again. I said, I called the treatment center. I've got a time for you. They're willing to take you. And here's the date and the time. And, you know, work hard this time. Do good in treatment. Give him the little pep talk. Out the door. And you know what I was thinking? Wow. 15 minutes. I did that in 15 minutes. This doesn't have to ruin my day. Now, there wasn't much caring in my heart at that point. And I didn't have a lot of respect about what I was thinking when I thought about it years later. But on that day, on that anniversary day, for a number of years, he came back to see me. And every time it was the same thing. Duke, thank you so much for saving my life a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't helped me out that day, I'm so grateful for what you did and what you said. And I'm going, oh my gosh, if he knew what I had actually been thinking. And the only thing that saved me was I did the right thing. One more time, I did the right thing. So what I would encourage you to do for that loved one, that alcoholic in your life or that addict in your life that you may be concerned about, hang in there. Hang in there. And reach out to them. Do things that keep yourself healthy. And do the right thing.